Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Hey guys, very excited to be introducing to you today the CEO of UBalancer Solutions. This is Ali Lalu. She's a neuro leadership coach and expert in emotional intelligence, and going to be talking to us today about the emotions and the role that they play on our body and our decisions and the science behind that. So we've touched on it already, but now we're going to get a little bit more in depth from the experts. So welcome along today, Ali. We're excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be here.
Awesome.
Hi guys, I'm Ali from UBalancer Solutions. Anthony's invited me along to add a little bit of science to the health world. And as a practitioner of the 6 Seconds Emotional Intelligence Network, I'd like to bring along a little bit of information around emotions today and how we use emotions to actually help us navigate this world of having great health and well-being. Everyone has a different understanding of emotional intelligence, but really all it means is that we're able to be smarter with our feelings, to have the ability to connect, to understand, to feel what's happening in our bodies, to listen, to tune in, and then to be able to take a bit of space and connect that feeling with our cognition or with our thinking brain. And it's being smarter with our feelings that essentially makes us intelligent with our emotions. You know, the interesting thing is we're born with an IQ, and it doesn't vary terribly during our lifetime, but our EQ, our emotional intelligence, is so learnable, and with the right kind of awareness can grow really quickly. So today I'm going to take you on a brief journey into the brain and understanding how the brain and our emotions work together, and how in fact emotions are directly responsible for the health of our cells, which comes as a surprise to many people. As a practitioner working with the 6 Seconds Emotional Intelligence Network, we have our own way of looking at emotional intelligence, and we call it the KCG model. So in other words, let's really know ourselves. Let's know what our emotions are telling us. Let's understand the data and the information that they're giving us. And let's be literate, quite in the same way that you would go to a different country like France and have to learn a new language. If you couldn't speak that language, you'd land in that country and you'd feel lost. And so it is with our emotional literacy. Once we really develop a language for how we're feeling, we actually can get along a lot better in the world. And the other part of the Know Yourself quadrant really is about understanding our patterns. We all have emotional patterns, and I'm sure that if you're anything like me, you've started to eat a certain way and after a period of time it drops away, or you've started an exercise program and you might find it difficult to continue, or just the busyness of life gets in the way. And so there might be patterns playing out, and your emotions might be showing up in those patterns in different ways, and it's really useful to develop the awareness around what's happening in the Know Yourself quadrant. And then we look at the sort of Choose Yourself, and there are many competencies that come into this quadrant. But what I'd like to emphasize here is a very special one, which is consequential thinking. So, you know, there was an experiment done a long time ago where some children were put in a room and they were offered some marshmallows. But here was the trick with this experiment. You could either eat the marshmallow straight away and you got one, or you could wait 10 minutes and have nothing. But if you could wait 10 minutes, you'd get 2 marshmallows. And the interesting thing, those children who were able to wait the 10 minutes were the ones who actually, because it was a longitudinal study, the ones who went on in life to actually develop some resilience and some ability to actually delay gratification. So what we can learn from this is that there's always consequences to our actions if we get that kind of if-then thinking happening. So if I make this choice now, what are going to be the flow-on effects? And let's stop and think about that. So we're aware of our emotions, what messages they're giving us, but what are going to be the consequences if I do this or if I don't do that? And there are other competencies like optimism, navigating those emotions. You know, how do we actually process and interpret our feelings? But I'm not going to go into great detail in these competencies today. I more want to explain to you what happens in our brains when these emotions are activated. Many people are surprised to hear that emotions are actually neuropeptides. So they're nothing more than strings of amino acids bound together. And they're produced in our brain and in different parts of our bodies in response to triggers. So there are 8 primary emotions that was discovered by a man, well, many scientists, but actually it was Plutchik, a psychologist, who kind of really defined we have 8 primary emotions. And thousands of feelings flow on from those emotions. And many people say, well, what is the difference between an emotion and a feeling? And the answer is simply time. The emotion is triggered, that neurochemistry fires off in our brain, and within a matter of seconds, and they say about 6 seconds, those emotions or those neuropeptides flood through our body and start to cause a whole cascade of effects. So I'm sure all of you will have felt at some stage your heart start to beat, or you go clammy, or you just have this bodily knowing that something's going on for you. And then there's that click into the cognition. Something's happening here, and we start to have a whole range of feelings. So, you know, we might know that it's around anger, but there could be literally dozens of words to describe what we're feeling around that emotion. But there is a little bit of a time delay between that initial hit of the neurotransmitter or the neuropeptide being released and the bodily reaction and our interpretation of actually what's going on for us. And I recall in my early days working with as a practitioner with 6 seconds, being absolutely astounded to find out that this rush of neurochemistry that goes through our body actually affects every cell in our body. So there's this kind of stickiness to these neuropeptides, and they'll attach to cells and they'll start changing the neurochemistry of the cells. So we might feel angry, and unfortunately the actual neurochemical effect of that anger doesn't last just those 2 or 3 minutes that the angry outburst lasted, but can last for several hours in our body. So when we experience emotion, we really have to find a way to navigate emotion effectively, so that we really find a way to manage this flow on of neurochemistry and protect our health from the long-lasting effects of those more I call them away emotions. We don't talk about positive and negative emotions, but those emotions that actually are likely to have a detrimental effect on our health. We need to find a way to actually really name them early on and navigate them. Manage the process so that we don't give them the opportunity to affect our well-being and our health in the longer term. So that one of the neuropeptides that is released in a threat response, and I'm sure that you've come across this, is cortisol. So cortisol, you know, in elevated levels hanging around in our bloodstream and attaching to our cells isn't a good thing. Emotions are what we call puffy, or some people say poofy. But the thing is, they are primal. They have been around since the beginning of man, and they're there for a reason. They're there because we need, as humans, to be given certain messages. And there's no doubt that in the early days of wild cavemen and being on the savannas, you know, when you're being chased by tigers and lions and things, you really needed to be able to run and to get away. It was a matter of survival. It was life and death. These days we don't quite have those challenges. We have other challenges, often people challenges, but our emotions have never changed. They're primal. They're there really for a survival mechanism. They're there to give us the messages and the data. They're universal. We all have them. Nobody gets away without having all the emotions and the range of feelings. What is different, though, is our ability to actually have the literacy or the language around those emotions. The more we can grow that, the easier life's going to feel. And in fact, the easier it's going to be to stick with your healthy life plan, the more you can read your own emotions. They're functional, as I say, they're there for a reason. Emotions are highly infectious. We can't help but be affected by someone near us who's feeling a particular emotion. We have these things called mirror neurons, and they sit just below our prefrontal cortex here in our brain, and they were discovered in monkeys, you know, many in an experiment some years ago. And our mirror neurons will fire. If someone's feeling a certain emotion or feeling, we'll feel that too. There's this other word which I love called enthalpy, which is actually, if someone's close to you, there's actually a closed energy system between you. And if that person's heart starts to beat at a certain rhythm, so does yours. And it's really interesting that it takes about 0.07 seconds for someone to know whether actually they're attracted or whether they're not attracted towards you. And that is that initial rush of the neurochemistry. So these, we talk about emotions and feelings interchangeably, but the message just that I want to share with you today is that they're very, very important. And they're very important in your own health journey. So the basic messages that we get from all the emotions such as anger is, what's in my way. If you're feeling angry, you can bet your life that something's blocking you somewhere, somehow. Or if you're feeling afraid, generally something is at risk for you. So when you think of an emotion, ask some further questions. Ask yourself, what's actually going on for me here? It's really important that we're able to acknowledge and bring our emotions to the surface, to find a way of recognizing them. Great if you can journal them, write them down, everything you're feeling along your journey on this retreat. Just get those emotions out there. I journal every day. I write what I'm feeling, I get it out there, and it's that expression of the emotion that stops it from building up intensity. So if you're feeling an emotion that's one of the what I call away brain emotions, which are really producing a lot of cortisol, they're uncomfortable, perhaps it's a fear-based emotion and, you're feeling something's at risk here, something's going on. It's really helpful to be able to name that emotion and get it out of your limbic brain before it starts to build an intensity and have a flow-on effect for your health. There was a fellow called Plutchik who did some wonderful work, and I've actually got a lovely diagram which you can have a look at, and you can see in the outer part of the diagram, that's when we start to feel something going on. And if we can manage it or navigate it early on, and I'm going to give you a technique to do that, then it doesn't build an intensity, because once it builds an intensity, it can go to a very, very, very strong feeling quite quickly. And we know, we've all seen people who get triggered. We've seen road rage.
So Ali, what happens if, say, I've had a hard day at work and I'm feeling some of these emotions, perhaps frustration or anger or fatigue, and I had an intention to get to the gym that day or follow my meal plan, and now I'm just kind of feeling like stuff that I can't be bothered anymore. How might we be able to navigate that?
Yeah, Anthony, I'm sure that happens a lot to people. Navigating that well would be around recognizing that it's important that emotions are expressed. So as you're driving in the traffic and you're, going along there, just to have a bit of self-talk going along, what did I feel today? Just go through the process. Try and find at least 3, 4 or 5 things that express how you're feeling. Words that put language to what's going on for you. And after that, you actually will start to feel calmer. Of course, all these things are combined with breath. So you slow your breathing, you take slow, deep breaths, naming of the feelings, and you'll find yourself come to a place where you go, you know what, I can actually kind of peacefully listen to these emotions. I can kind of accept them. They'll be dampened in our limbic brain, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the brain in a moment.
Sure.
But once they're dampened in intensity, they actually open up your prefrontal cortex for some clear thinking. Because the truth is that your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of your thinking, logical brain, where language resides, it's the high kind of level of human thinking. It works reciprocally to our limbic brain, which is the center of emotion. So if you are fired up around something, this will shut down, and your thinking will go, stuff it. I'm not going to go to the gym, I'm not going to go and do that, I'm just going to go home, have a packet of chips. Okay? If you're able to name those emotions, express your feelings, even just to yourself as you're driving, or even listen to music, do something to bring out the emotion. You'll find your actual prefrontal cortex can actually do some clear thinking, and you now rationally can connect with the logic and go, I am going to go to the gym because I've thought it through, and it's actually really, I want a balanced, healthy, good life.
Awesome.
So you're much more likely to make the decision that you want to be your future self will thank you for.
So basically, and that's really, really cool stuff to hear, but basically if I don't process those emotions or allow myself to experience and feel those emotions, I'm literally greatly reducing my chances of sticking to my plan, because I just can't access that part of the brain that wants to go to the gym or wants to eat well or wants to reach my goals.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, because you kind of become limbic.
Yeah, wow.
And limbic means, you know, that the cortisol and the things are ramping up, and you basically just get to a point where you say, well, you know, I'm not going to do it. I'm pulling out of this one.
You heard it here first. Wow, good one.
Okay. So here's a quick snapshot of how your brain works. Right in the middle, we've got this area called the limbic brain. It's made up of the hippocampus, the thalamus, and the amygdala. We talk a lot about the amygdala, the two little almond-shaped pieces on either side in the central part of your brain. And your limbic brain is your emotional headquarters. Just think of it like that. And then in the front here, underneath my forehead, so sort of in this part of your brain, we've got what we call the prefrontal cortex, which is commonly known as the PFC. Now the PFC is very, very, very energy intensive, very fussy. A lot of the glucose and a lot of the energy that you utilize in a day actually goes towards keeping this part of your brain going. So it's your working memory, but it gets tired really quickly, and it's a serial process. It can't process too much information at the same time. Important thing, PFC needs a lot of sleep. So yesterday I was at a Todd Sampson breakfast, and you know, we always hear from people that we need a lot of sleep and it's important for our cognitive functioning, but he says we need 8 hours of sleep every night, no matter who we are. And without that sleep, we're actually cognitively impaired. So PFC needs all of these good things to keep us healthy and balanced. The interesting thing for you to notice here is that the limbic brain and the prefrontal cortex don't work well together. When we are not navigating our emotions well, and that limbic brain is firing, and they can tell the amazing thing that's happening in the brain these days with functional MRIs, and we can see which parts of the brain are lighting up at different times. So when this is lighting up, it's actually harder to think. It's harder to think clearly, and it's harder to do that kind of choose yourself bit where you connect with your logic and you actually make a good decision to respond rather than to react to something. And certainly in a health plan, we want to have full access to this part of our brain. So how does the brain work? Well, we have a trigger or a stimulus come in, and the thalamus, which is kind of our air traffic controller, is kind of looking out for the signals, just like a plane comes in and lands at the airport and the air traffic controller is going, who are we going to let in now, who are we not going to let land? So the thalamus is firing. It then sends a message up to your cortical brain. The cortical brain, logical brain, is going to interpret that information. If it's a visual stimulus coming in, it's your visual cortex that's going to be lit up at that point in time. Message then goes to the amygdala. The amygdala then goes, okay, I'm going to respond in a certain way. And that's just a lovely, healthy loop. Probably what's happening when things are going fairly well and fairly smooth sailing for you. But sometimes we get triggered. In fact, oftentimes we get triggered. And it can happen multiple times a day. Someone will say something to you that upsets you, or something will happen at work, or you're stuck in traffic, or you know, something's happened to one of your children. There are multiple reasons we get triggered, and when that happens, the message comes to the thalamus. It's air traffic controlling, paying attention, but it bypasses the cortex. The message shoots across to the amygdala, and unfortunately we have what we call an amygdala hijack. So when you get hijacked, you can't engage your thinking, and you're likely to make a decision that you won't be thankful for. So you might say something you regret, you might reach for that extra bit of, food that packet of lollies, or you might actually, lose your ability to communicate calmly. You might yell and scream and shout. People have many ways of expressing their amygdala hijacks, but it's not a healthy loop. And so I'm going to share with you today this fantastic little trick. It's called a 6-second pause, and it is incredible how easy it is to operate every day, using a 6-second pause, and revolutionize your emotional world. A 6-second pause is all it takes for you to stop that amygdala hijack. So you notice the stimulus, you've got to be aware of the emotion, you've been triggered, you can pick up the sensation in your body, and the first thing you obviously can do is stop and breathe. Now I love box breathing. Breathe in for 3 or 4 seconds, hold your breath 3 or 4 seconds, breathe out for 3 or 4, and then hold your breath again, and keep that going a few times. But there's another lovely trick. You've got to give your brain something to do that it's not familiar with, to kind of break the circuit of the hijack. So counting from 6 to 1 backwards in a language that's new to you, or naming the top 6 or 7 teams in the football league, or I've got someone I know that I've been coaching, she's actually naming the 7 dwarfs. Every time she feels a trigger, she does that. But the thing is, once your brain becomes familiar with that pattern, you've got to find another one. Maybe you're counting back from 100 in lots of 12 or 15 or whatever it is for your brain. You've got to find a circuit breaker. And it's your 6-second pause, and once you get that in place, by the time you've done it a few times, you've calmed the amygdala. Quite literally, the amygdala's not lighting up as much, and you've freed up your cortical thinking, and you're likely then to be able to engage with your prefrontal brain and think through a more calm and measured response.
If you feel like a room with